Welcome back to Real Weddings with Sara, the bridal suite series. Okay, so we've a different backdrop today because we are out in the brand new refurbished Grand Malahide. Guys, I have not been in this hotel in years, and I mean years. This is an absolute treasure trove and the renovation is exquisite. You're going to see this today with the bridal suite, but they've got so much more coming. New ballroom, bedroom refurb, but one thing that stays the same here is the absolutely out of this world spectacular view, and I'm hoping Gabby will stitch in a little bit of that as I talk about it. It is unreal. We're talking views stretching the whole of the Dublin landscape. It's unreal. Okay, so you need to check them out at grandmalahide.ie. Now let's get into it. So I put it to all of you as to what you wanted me to talk about on the podcast, and overwhelmingly you came back about money. Of course you did. You're money mad. Anyway, over the next two series, there's so much to it, I have to break it down over two series. So today I'm going to talk to you about money as a mindset when it comes to your wedding. We'll talk about the cost of stuff. Next week then, in next week's podcast, I'm going to go right into how much are guests putting in cards and all those cheeky questions that you want to know and don't want to be caught asking. So we'll cover all of that. But without further ado, come on, let's get stuck in. This series of Real Weddings with Sara is proudly sponsored by Aurelia Cosmetic Clinics, who specialise in bridal cosmetic essentials from skin prep to more advanced treatments. You can learn more about them over on aurelia.ie. Right, so you've been asking about money. Money. And it does make the world go round, and it can buy you happiness. I don't care what people say, they can feck off. It does. It buys you a nice wedding. However, there's a lot of madness that goes with money because people have very different feelings about money, and you're spending a lot of money and people are charging a lot of money, and it can make you feel quite emotional and quite vulnerable. So I really respect that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is you guys as a couple, right? Because one person sent me a message that she's just really upset with her fiance, right? So I'll give you the background to this and then I'll talk to you about it. So basically what she had come to me about was she had said that her fiance has a substantial amount of savings, right? So they're only recently engaged, they're starting the early process. Substantial amount of savings. I don't know what substantial means. That could be 5 grand, 10, 20, 100, who knows, right? Neither here nor there. But he does not want to use that to go towards the wedding. He would rather that they saved properly for that. And she feels really upset because the money's there. It's going to take them a lot of work to get that saving in, etc. So what struck me straight away and the thought that came into my head is, and look, I worked in, financial services marketing for years, but I also have clients that are in financial services. And the thing I've really learned to understand is that money can be quite behavioral, right? It's a real mindset. So, people value money differently, and it can be how they're brought up, their sense of security, their sense of scarcity, their worries, their fears, and it really does tap in on that inner fear. So in one regard, I see where she's coming from because, look, we know they're so expensive, and particularly if you want your dream day, and people are going to put a different value on how much they're willing to spend on the day anyway. But when I step back from it and I look at the big picture, right, and not to rain on anyone's parade, but a wedding is one day in your life, a big day, a significant day, right? I'm not taking away from that. But, you have so many things you're going to need money for in the future, right? I don't know if you've got your house already. I don't know if you've got kids already. I don't, to be honest, if you have a substantial lump sum of savings, highly unlikely you still have kids. But anyway, neither here nor there. But, I can see his point, right? Now, bear with me because it's not the news you want to hear, but there are going to be emergencies that come up. There are going to be longer term things in your life that are going to need substantial money. And wouldn't it be great to know you've got the security that if anything happens, that you've got this money as security? Whereas the wedding is a project for the two of you. It's not a one-band person that can fund this. Now, don't get me wrong, in some couples, one might turn around and say, yeah, I'm happy to put all of that in. That's okay. But in this instance, this is a 50-50 partnership. And this is the first point for a lot of couples where you start to realise, oh my God, our finances are starting to come together. This might be the first time for some couples where they've a joint account together. Don't get me wrong. I know there's a lot of people out there who already have their house, they already have kids. They are already financially working in partnership. So this may not be as hard for them, apart from agreeing how much they're willing to spend, how much that they're willing to part with for it. But I think what we have to do is, right, no one's right, no one's wrong here, right? This is about a mindset. But what you do have to go into this thinking about is when you are setting down to think about where are we getting the money from? How much is this going to cost? Is that you're going in with at least an open mind to know not everybody has the same mindset as you when it comes to money. Not everybody is going to want to spend the same amount of money. Even your guests may not want to spend that money on staying overnight in a hotel as what you feel is okay, right? So people have different sense of value. So I think having the open mind and not seeing this as a rejection, right? Do not see this from his view as that he doesn't want to do it. He is saying he wants to get married, but he's saying, let's save for it. I don't see an issue with that. I actually think that's very healthy because you will always have, you are not in a really vulnerable position where every cent of your money is gone out to wedding suppliers and wedding venues and you have nothing in case of a rainy day. I think it's a really healthy thing to still have a pot sitting there, okay? But I think the important thing here is the understanding that for a lot of you, you're going to be sitting down and talking about money, which can feel awkward. Because for some people, and I've come across this before, some people have a perception that their partner has a lot more money than they say they do, or they're good with money, and maybe they're not. And a lot of things can be exposed when you actually sit down to say, okay, this wedding's going to cost us 40k. How are we going to get there? And that is the reality. With that in mind then, and just touching on that, when you're thinking about getting married, a lot of people would love to get married a year later, but financially that may not be viable. So the trends I'm seeing when I'm doing consultancy with hotels and looking at booking windows is that most are booking 18 months to 2 years out to give themselves time to save for the wedding that they actually want. So that's another big thing. Now, when you also think about your money, don't be expecting how much you get in your card to actually subsidize an entire wedding. You're not going to get that full money to cover the cost of your wedding. That is a myth, and I hear people all the time saying, oh, we're just paying for their wedding. Look, the presents will never cover the cost of the wedding unless you've got very generous relatives who give you a big lump sum, which that can happen if you're fortunate enough to do that. And in some cases that can absolutely cover a big chunk of the cost of your wedding. But one thing I always remember with couples when I was a wedding coordinator was that you'd sit down to talk about, the payment plan that you have to put people on, and they'll say, well, after I will be, we're going to get our money in from our guests that day, so we'll clear that the following morning. Just so you know, every wedding supplier and every venue, the works, you will always have to pay for that on either some are the day of, but majority of the heavy ticket items, you will be paying for that maybe even a month before it even takes place. So don't be relying on the money that you're going to get back as a cash gift is going to actually be able to pay for your wedding. It's your payment schedule works differently. Now, I have heard of a lot that are talking about getting loans and getting loans out for their wedding. And look, guys, whatever works. But just remember, you're probably paying about 7 to 8 to 9% on that to get a loan. So, and some providers don't let you pay it all back up. So you may take that loan out in June, have your wedding in July and say, right, we have the money to clear it all in August. But they may not let you pay it all completely off because they'll want to get their interest on that loan. So you just really need to understand your terms and conditions. I'd always say, please don't get yourself into debt for your wedding. Work with what you have, because I can tell you, you'll have great intentions to say, we'll pay that wedding off as soon as we get married. I can tell you something, you'll go on honeymoon and that'll go out the window. So just to bear that one in mind, you don't want a 7-year hangover paying off a loan for a wedding either, right? And banks, you can come at me for that because I know that you like to ask people to do that. Now, that's the early part. Sitting down together as a couple, being respectful and open that not everybody thinks the same way when it comes to money. Also being really transparent with your money, because this is probably going to be the starting point that, well, hold on, what else do we want to get in the future? Like, think about that. We have a wedding, we will want to get a house, we'll need a deposit for that. How are we going to do it all together? Have a really clear conversation. Get into a conflict, healthy conflict, because sometimes we have to have difficult conversations to actually progress. So it's not a bad sign. You're not breaking up. The wedding's still going ahead, but you need to be able to have those really good, clear conversations. If you think parents are going to be helping you out, as awkward as that might be, you might want to ask them in advance, look, what is it going to be? Because you need to know the lay of the land, So just to bear that one in mind. Now, I'm going to move on to the second part of what people are asking me, and I'm just flicking my notes here. So the big one is, why do weddings cost so much now, right? And this stemmed from another girl who messaged me saying she's in a particular forum and there's loads of girls talking about, oh, I'm able to get a photographer for €800, and there's all this conversation going on about how much other people pay, right? So never benchmark your wedding on what other people are doing, because other people have different aspirations visually. Like, somebody could be well paying €800 for a photographer, but you don't know if that's for 3 hours for the day. You don't know if they're doing all the way up to first dance. You don't know if they're getting an album. You don't know what they're getting, right? So you never know what's included in these things. But also quality is a different thing. Like, there are very different tiers in the market in terms of quality of various different suppliers in the market, right? So there's a couple of things that spring to mind why it's so expensive. So I'll break it down in as clear a point as I think I can make. Okay, so number one, Ireland's wedding industry has had a major glow up in the last number of years, right? If I go back maybe 20 years ago, let's go pre-Celtic Tiger. There was you had the big hotels around the country. They were huge. They have big, massive ballrooms, and people were having these very luscious weddings, right? They were having beautiful, big numbers, pile it in, really big weddings. And over the years, that has remained. And then, we got a crash, and then people pulled back a little bit, smaller numbers, and then that picked up a little bit. We'd COVID, that went right down, and then came back up a little bit. But it's never really come back up to those kind of Celtic Tiger days. However, I think this year, for the first year in a long time, the numbers that people are shouting around and talking about is more than I would have seen when I was working through the Celtic Tiger. Okay, so that speaks volumes. Now, why is that? Okay, as I said, Ireland has had a major glow up. So the product for weddings in Ireland is so much better than it used to be. Fact. Okay, what's driving that? Well, demand and openness to seeing visuals across the world, seeing what other countries are doing, and as you build creativity and stack creativity, things get better and better and better. We have a broader portfolio of exclusive houses, exclusive mansions, castles refurbed. There is a lot more in the market of a higher quality of choice. We didn't have as much luxury choice. Now, somebody can change that for me, but for the middle market out there wasn't as much luxury choice that was accessible to a lot of people that were living within Ireland, right? There was always good castles, and there was always that. We always would have seen that. But now we've got these estate, houses that have been beautifully restored, and they're, thriving wedding venues. They are the ones that have the highest demand, So that has escalated. So where you had a market that were paying maybe, top end price of €99 a head, and that's now 140, 150. And I know, look, it goes way up. But it's because the calibre is higher, right? So more and more people are being drawn to these higher quality, higher experience maybe offerings than what was previously on the market. So that's naturally driving up their willingness to spend. It's not that they have necessarily got more expensive. They've always been expensive, but it's now that there's just a higher demand for that. It's more accessible and there's more of them. So I think that has had a part to play. Now, on top of that, we're also seeing outside of venues, like, our photographers are exceptional. They're absolutely, like, our creative industry in weddings is phenomenal. And I think, again, that's that piece of people's expectations and people learning from across the world, and the synergies of social media building people up to be better operators. So we've a higher quality. And the thing about it is where you've got a really high quality photographer, videographer, band, DJ, whatever it is, you will always have much higher demand on them. So they're going to charge a higher price. And that's the way it is. So if you think about the hospitality industry, right? So strip everything back and it's a wedding. It's still the hospitality industry. And the hospitality industry works really off supply and demand. So if you've got a high demand for a low supply, the price goes up. And Ireland is a small island. It has a high density of wedding product offering, but it's still a very high demand, because it's not just the Irish market that are looking for Ireland. You have a huge market that are coming in from the US and from all other parts of the world, where actually Ireland is a very reasonably priced destination to get married. So if your cost of living is what we're living with here in Ireland, it can feel expensive to get married here. But for the Americans, the luxury Americans coming in, they can do a 5-day wedding and still it'd be cheaper than getting something standard in America, right? So just to bear that in mind. And again, so that's more pressures on demand, which is pushing up the price for everybody else. Because if you've got a market very willing to pay a price, then that's the way the price is going to be set. Is that right or wrong? I don't know economics, but I'm just telling you that's how it works. So Ireland is a very attractive market. There's a lot of demand for it. We've got better calibre of product. So what we also saw was when COVID hit, that also stagnated and meant that a lot of weddings couldn't happen. That flurry coming out of COVID meant that it put huge pressure on the backlog of weddings that had to happen. And then we had this kind of lull where, you know, there wasn't a lot of engagements. It was a steady market, but it wasn't a high intense market. But now we're seeing post-COVID, people are getting engaged. And there's actually, those numbers are lifting up a little bit. So that's pushing demand, right? And when you've got demand, price goes up. Now, that's all things being fair and equal. That's not even taking in government policy, which I'm going to really explain now in a minute. But that is when all things are equal. That is the general way a commercial market will work. It's the same as if you're trying to book a hotel or a flight. That's the way it goes. So let me try and get into now. This is a real sticking point for me, and it's something that I really, it grinds my gears, right? Because I've worked in the hospitality industry for years, and whether that's indirectly, out directly as a consultant is not. But the progress of an industry is really, really levelled on what the government policy is, right? So the government policy at this one is probably the worst one I've seen in terms of progressing the hospitality industry. And look, I'm not an expert on all of this, but it's just, for me, as someone who's sitting on the sidelines looking in, I'm scratching my head going, what the hell is going on? How is this actually doing right by the industry and helping it thrive and keep employment going? And also, like, giving you, the consumer, better pricing, because choice, having more product available means more choice, which means less increase in inflation and price. So couple of things over 2026. So first of all, there's this whole thing which you might have noticed, you might have heard about, the VAT rate's at 13.5% and we want to get it to 9%. So the government gave the 9% on food, and that doesn't kick in till June. All right? So just in case you're thinking, come January, our food costs are going to go down. No, that's not going to happen. So meanwhile, while the 9% is kicking in June, it is only on food. Right? So let's say this VAT rate here on food, and this really isn't necessarily a consumer play, it's an industry play. It's to keep the industry going. Now, let's take that on one piece, right? So 9%, and everybody's gone, brilliant, we got the 9%. However, on the other side over here, there's this little policy that's after coming out, increasing the VAT rate on conference meeting and event rooms, so on room hire. So you're booking a room to host your wedding, that's room hire. So actually the VAT rate is increased on that. So what you think you're getting off over here is actually inflating that, right? So from a venue's perspective, they're going, okay, like, this is wild. Now, do you want to really add fuel to the fire? Do you know what you do? Okay, so from an industry perspective, I'm not saying this on a personal one, but you throw increasing minimum wage on an industry that is so open and vulnerable to minimum wage increase and decrease, right? So now minimum wage has gone up. The hospitality sector as a majority is very sensitive to minimum wage increase because so many are employed on a minimum wage, and when minimum wage goes up and some people see that those at minimum wage are getting an increase, then people at the next layers and levels up, they also want to get their increase too. Rightly so, right? We all want a wage increase. We're all working hard. We're all struggling to find our costs and keep, our head above water. So what all that does is it basically says that actually, hold on, there's nothing actually being done for the hospitality industry. So what you would like to see in terms of prices coming down, as long as those core things were around VAT and around cost to hire people, and look, obviously there's auto enrollment, there's a whole load of other things that are coming in, that is just completely pushing the industry at capacity. So that's why prices are increasing. Am I saying that's right or wrong? No, and don't get me wrong, there are venues out there that are very profitable that, this mightn't put a dent in them, I know, but that's the reality, okay? And I see it myself. I'm auditing venues here, there and everywhere, and I'm seeing like, okay, where is this going? And I do look at it. Now, another layer to that is venues also, and the hospitality industry also have the same overheads that you have. Energy, food, fuel, all of those things, they've all gone up for them. And as well, in particular, where it's not like, you can turn around on your weekly shop and say, look, we're just actually not going to buy beef. It's too expensive to get a joint beef. What was €7 is now €10 for a joint beef. I know that's a cheap cut, but venues don't have that because beef is like it's a core dish. Beef or salmon, beef or chicken. Beef is like, it's Irish. People love their beef. So that cost of beef is really pushing things up. The cost of chicken has gone up. Turkey's gone up. Look, it's all gone up, right? Now, by no means am I sitting here saying, oh, the poor venues. I'm not, right? I'm just explaining that those issues are what are causing venues to sit down at tables and going, okay, how can we actually yield, any form of a profit or break even or not be in debt and lose and have to shut down. It's those things that are putting pressure on the pricing, where they have to adjust their pricing accordingly. Now, that's all well and good, provided you've got a property that somebody is willing to pay that rate for. And that's where if people can see the value and have got a willingness to pay, saying, yeah, this venue is good enough, I am willing to pay 250 a head, then that's all fair. But that is a major issue, and that's where a lot are really trying to figure it out. And that's why you might see with some venues that they're getting a little bit tighter on, adding value into your package. Now, in saying that, I am seeing unbelievable value across the country, really in the hotel category. So all-inclusive packages where everything's included, from photographer, band, DJ. So look, if you want to get married and you're trying to say, look, I want to save, but I want to have a great day out, please look at that market and look for those packages, because you can still get value in the market, because actually the hotels are probably in a little bit more of a better position than the venues who have to just open for your day, because they have other diverse business coming through the books all the time. So that they can spread their costs in a little bit more of an equal way. So just bear that one in mind. That there's really good value out there if you go looking for it. Okay? So it's really important that we don't see venues closing down. It's really important that we don't see really good wedding suppliers leaving the market, because we need good quality and we need choice. Without the two things like that, we've got a monopoly in the market, and that means prices are going to be not where we want them to be. So having that choice is a really, really good thing. If I'm to reflect on 20 years knowing this industry, I feel this is really, it's the wildest year I've ever seen. It is really, really crazy. And I feel couples are actively looking for luxury. They want luxury. They don't seem to want lower or middle of the road. They want luxury, and they are not buying a load and load and load of extra bits to fill their wedding with stuff. They're actually just buying the core essentials, but they're doing it really, really well and cutting out a lot of noise. I'm definitely seeing that. And I'm seeing that it's all about experience. So that's really where the money is going. So it's behavioural and it's economical. And look, I'd love to see this time next year what way this year plays out and how it'll affect 27. But I know that prices are gone up for 27. And yeah, I just wish it was better for all of you, because I know it's really hard. And I don't knowing it from both sides, it's very hard to be, pro one side or another, because I'm not. I'm sitting in the middle going, it's not fair on them, but it's these guys that could make the difference by changing one or two different things to make it more sustainable. So that's where my head's at, and that's my opinion. But if you're really struggling and want to find really good quality in the market, just DM me and I'll help you think through your choices and show you what's out there. But other than that, guys, this is part one of a 2-part series for the bridal suite edition. I went on my soapbox there about money, but I think it is really important that we understand it and we can break it down. We have a little bit more of a fun episode coming up on the second one, so we're going to start getting into guest money, because look, lads, there has to be some silver lining at the end of all of this. So stay tuned and I'll see you next week.